Dear friends, welcome back to Automate with Rakesh. In this video, we are going to cover a new topic called debugging. We have already covered advanced UI automation and we have covered all these topics. And also we have covered advanced control flow and we have seen example of all this topic in the playlist. Now it's time to start a new topic called debugging. And in this, the topic is perform remote debugging when building automation projects. Now, remote debugging. For this, which course should you study in UiPath Academy? Let me show you. In UiPath Academy, search for the topic remote debugging with Studio. And this is the course which you have to complete. You can easily find this course by going to courses and search for remote debugging with Studio. This is around 1 hour course. In this video, I am going to make it quite easy and give you a demonstration of what is a remote debugging looks like. And post that, you can spend your own time to go through the entire material. Before starting this particular course, let me give you a small demonstration of a remote debugging. For this, in my UiPath Studio, I have added a simple activity called message box. Here I'm saying, good morning, Rakesh. Now let me show you my remote machine. So this is my remote machine, which is connected. I have another laptop where I have connected using the remote desktop. Now I have connected to the remote desktop and it is completely blank. Nothing is being done. Here, if I wanted to debug, so the topic is remote debug. I'll go to debug tab and you can see my remote debugging is enabled. I'm going to teach you how do you configure remote debugging, but let's see the demonstration. If I'm going to run this, if I'm going to debug this, what is happening if I look at keep my remote desktop side by side, and I'm going to show you here what's happening. So here it is saying downloading project. Temporarily it is downloading to a temp folder in the remote machine. Here it says debug started for file main. Okay, so now we'll wait for a few seconds. Once the download is complete, you will see what are the next things that are happening. Now you can see the project transferring assembly. So you can see a lot of things are happening. Restoring the NuGet packages restored. Now what happened? The message box, this workflow I have run it from my laptop. However, the debugging is actually happening on the remote PC. And you can see, good morning, Rakesh. The output is appearing inside my another PC. So this is called remote debugging. This is a demonstration of remote debugging. That means you are debugging, you are not debugging on the laptop where the developer is developing. Rather, you are debugging it in the production system where your actual bot might be running, or you are debugging in any other machine which is remote. So you can see when I ran it, the output has appeared in my remote machine. Let me click on OK. And after that, you will see if I go to the output, automation execution started, execution ended. Okay. So now if I go here to my remote machine, you can see it says job finished, succeeded. So now what happened? The entire debugging has happened on the remote PC, not on my PC. Now, why remote debugging is required? Now here you can get the explanation. As an automation developer, you can test and debug processes remotely, even on the actual production machine, taking into account changes in hardware, software and permissions. So your laptop, the developer's laptop, might have a different hardware configuration, a software configuration and permissions, wherein your actual production machine where the automation is going to run might have a different configuration. That's why it is always a good practice to always test it in the target system, right? So that you are 100% sure that your automation that you have developed is going to run. By doing so, the automation runs reliably and maintains the integrity of the process. So this is the reason why you need remote debugging. Now the next topic is how do you set up remote debugging? So in this course, here you have something called setup remote debugging. Now many of us may or may not have a remote PC to check this out, or how do you set it up? In this video, I'm going to demonstrate each step-by-step process for you to set a remote debugging. How do you configure it? I'm going to talk here. The very first step, what you do as a developer, you are working on a laptop. On that laptop, you check what is the version of Studio you are using. In this example, I'm using 2023.10.3. The same thing I'm going to check in the remote PC. In the remote PC, I have opened UiPath Assistant, Help, and I'm checking the version here 2023.10.3. So both the versions are matching on my laptop as a developer, and also on the remote PC, the versions are matching. Let's see how the remote configuration is actually done. And this is actually defined in this particular step, configure the remote agent. And here are the steps given in detail. Okay, how to set the port number, how to set the password, what is this. Now everything will be clear if you look at my notepad. In the notepad, I have made it pretty simple. Now look at it, what I'm going to do. The very first thing, you need to determine how the installation is done on the remote machine. So the remote machine, you might have installed the Studio per machine installation. That means all your Studio UiPath files will be there inside program files folder. Or else you might have installed per user installation, wherein all your program files of UiPath might be there in the application data folder. Let me show both of it. For example, program files. So if you see, if I copy this and I go to my remote machine, I'll open the file explorer, and if I'm going to simply, or you can do it on the run prompt. Now what is happening, you can see program files UiPath Studio, and inside this all my files are there. Now in this, one of the file is UiPath Remote. If I scroll down slowly, you can see there is a file called UiPath Remote Debugging Agent.exe. So this is there in my program file. So you check on your computer, where is this UiPath.remote-debugging.agent.exe exists. Now all these steps has to be done on the remote PC, okay, not on your computer. Just to understand this file I'm showing you. So this is on my remote PC, here it is available. Now it might be possible during your UiPath Studio installation, you might have installed only for that user specific installation you might have done. If that is the case, how it will appear, let me show you. So here I am on my local computer, not on the remote PC. So here if you see, I have installed it locally, not for the entire machine, for all the users, just for this user I've installed. So this is called per user installation, and in the remote PC you have seen is per machine installation. Per machine means program files, per user means in the app data local programs. Okay, now here if I search for UiPath Remote, okay, so UiPath Robot, yeah, so here you can see UiPath Remote Debugging.agent.exe. So this is the file important. Now once you have determined, where will you determine? In your remote machine. This will be determined in remote machine. You will determine where this installation file is available. So once you have determined, what you do, go to the remote machine. This is the very first step. Okay, go to the remote machine, open command prompt. In the command prompt, I have to get into this folder, okay, program files, because I understood it is there in program files. So I'll go inside this folder by writing cd space program files. Okay, let me try to enlarge it slide a bit. Clear? Now I'm going to hit on enter. So what would happen? I'm entering inside this particular folder. You can see I've entered inside the folder. After that, this particular command, right? This particular command is already given in your UiPath Academy. So this is the command. So if you see, run the following command, UiPath.remote-debugging-agent.exe enable port. This is what. So what I have done, I have copied this to a notepad. And here I have mentioned the port 8573. So this is the port through which your studio on your computer will communicate with the remote studio, remote machine. So this is the port 8573. So all you have to do, simply copy the code and replace this port number, right? This port number you have to replace with your number 8573, and password you have to put it as 85. So let me copy this here so that it becomes easy for you to compare. Until here. So this is the code given in the documentation. So I have replaced this with the 8573 port number. And the password, you can put any number. For example, I'll put 123 123. Done. Now I'm going to copy this entire command. I'll go to the remote PC. Here, simply paste this and run it. So what is happening in the remote PC? It will get minimized. If it is minimized, open it again. You will see it says agent online and waiting for the command. So that means this remote machine is now connected with your machine. Okay, the remote machine is now connected with your machine. So you can see robot on machine Rakesh PC is waiting for remote debugging instruction on port 8573. UiPath remote debugging agent.information online and waiting for the command. Okay, so my studio is connected to orchestrator. Even the assistant available here is connected. If you see it here, okay, it is connected. So all set. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to run it from my laptop. So I am there on my laptop. I'll go to the workflow. So here there's an option called, so by default it'll be something like this. Okay, so it'll be something like this. So you come to the debug tab, click on remote debugging. This is how it will appear. So here the very first thing I have to do is remote machine, and here you have to get your IP address of the remote machine and provide the port number as 8573 and the password that you have set. So what is the password that I've set? 123 123. So I'll say 123 123. Okay, so this password you can keep changing it. So after this demonstration I'm going to change it. So 123 123, I'll click on test connection. Remote machine configuration is valid. So you can see the remote machine configuration is valid. Click on save. So once this is done, if I'm going to debug, look at it. The moment I hit on debug, you can see a green bar has appeared which says remote machine 192.168. So your IP address 8573 is now connected. Okay, so now it is connected. Let me go to the remote machine. In the remote machine, what is happening? It is trying to download the project into a temporary folder. So it will take few minutes based on your speed of the connection. So now you can see it is downloading assembly. You can look at it, restoring, checking compatibility. So all the packages that was used in that project, everything got downloaded, and after that you can see the activity ran on my remote machine and saying good morning Rakesh. So this is what remote debugging is all about. So all you do after you have seen this demonstration and learned how to configure the remote debugging, now if you go through this entire course, this is going to help you a lot. Now I'm going to come up with few more videos to see the important critical points I am going to cover. So thank you guys for watching. Let's meet in our next video. Dear friends, in this video I'm going to show you another method of doing remote debugging. In the previous video we have seen how you can configure remote debugging. Let me show you the second option of remote debugging. For this, first of all, on your UiPath Studio, click on debug and come to remote debugging. Click on configure remote debugging. Here there are two different options: remote machine, unattended robot. Yesterday in the previous video we have seen remote machine. Now we are going to see unattended robot setup. Now for this, what you do, log into remote machine. In case you don't have a remote machine, this video will be quite helpful. So this is my remote machine, and in the remote machine, if you look at, my UiPath assistant is connected. This is the unattended license that I have. Now let me click on preferences, orchestrator settings, and you can see my UiPath assistant is connected using the machine key, and this is the unattended license. Now once my UiPath assistant is connected, next thing you have to come to your local machine. Here you need to select the second option, unattended robot. Once you select this, here it will give you automatically, it's going to detect how many different users are there in your orchestrator. So here if I click on, I'll be able to see my PC. So here all you do is simply click and select the options. So here I've selected the user, the machine name, the host name. In this one, there's also another option called show live stream. Check this in case you would like to see the live streaming happening. But this depends on the kind of connectivity or the speed that the remote PC has, so that it can send the live stream. Okay, because I have already connected and there's already a live stream is happening through the remote PC. You can see this is my remote PC. So let's see how it works. Once this is done, all you are doing is simply selecting unattended robot, selecting the user, selecting the machine in PC. That will automatically reflect based on the number of unattended robots that you might have on your orchestrator. It will automatically populate. Okay, now all I have to do, hit on save. Now I'll go to debug and I'm going to click on debug file. When I do this, look at the output panel. What are the things that is happening? It is uploading the project. Then it says connected. It is connected now to my remote PC. Okay, it is connected to my remote PC. I'll keep this one open in case just to see. Okay, so it is connected. Now it will take few minutes for it to, in the previous one you have seen, it was sending the dependencies, the packages into the remote machine. Yesterday I have shown you this, right? Using the previous setup. Okay, using the, so now here we are running the remote debugging using the UiPath assistant or the UiPath robot, unattended robot. We are trying to now look at what is happening here. Project uploaded, and here the live streaming has started. The live streaming. Now for me this is not working because the previous computer is slightly bit slow and it is not able to send the streaming because it's already sending streaming here in this window. Okay, so this is my live remote PC. So in this one, if you look at this, project uploaded, agent is initializing, transferring projects. So whatever project is there on this PC, right, this all are getting transferred. Okay, and let me keep that open. Okay, look at it. Transferring project transferred, assemblies transferred, restoring NuGet packages, right, package restored, automation with execution started. Now if you see, the execution has started, and if I look at my remote PC, the live streaming is yet trying to get that, but again it's not happening. So I have kept my remote PC open here. You can see the execution of that message box has been done. So you can see, like if you have multiple activities, you can debug one by one. You can do step into, step over, and all those things that you use for debugging can be done. But I've kept it pretty simple just to understand how it works, right? For everybody it may not be possible to do it test, to check this live. So here you can see it is happening live on the remote PC. The activity has come. Now if I click on OK, the execution will complete. Okay, so now you can see the execution has completed. So this is another way of doing the remote debugging. What is the another way? There are two ways that we have learned. One is unattended robot, the other one is remote machine. These are the two options available: remote machine and unattended robot. Both the examples we have seen. Now from the exam point of view, what are the important factors that you need to understand? Now look at this in the setup remote debugging. This is the important aspect. When you go for remote machine connection, Studio sends the list of project dependencies and activity feeds, package sources to the remote robot, which uses the feeds provided by Studio to download the required packages. So Studio sends the list of project dependencies and activity feeds. In the unattended robot, Studio sends only the list of project dependencies. Okay, activity feeds, it doesn't send the activity feeds. It sends only the list of project dependencies, not the activity feeds. Studio sends only list of project dependencies to the remote robot, which uses orchestrator feeds and the activity feeds configured on the remote robot to download the required packages. Now, what is the meaning of this? So here, Studio sends the list of project dependencies. What is the meaning of this? Now if I open my Studio, when it says Studio, from this local machine it is sending it to the remote machine. So this is my Studio. So this is the list. List means just the name. UiPath Excel activity, UiPath mail activity system. So this is the list. This is the name. It is sending the names of the dependencies required for this project. That is the meaning. List, just the name. Now the second thing, and activity feeds. What is the meaning of activity feeds? Activity feeds means in the bracket they have written package sources. So this is the name, but actually this has, if you go to your design and manage packages, what is happening whenever you are trying to install any of the package, this is the source, right? Source means it is coming directly and you are getting downloaded to your local PC, right? So now all these activity packages that you see in the project has been downloaded, the entire some MB, it could be some MB of download might have happened for all of these dependencies. So that is called source, the actual activity source. Okay, so package sources. So it is already downloaded to your studio. Now what it does when you go for a remote, which uses the feeds means, remember, the source, the actual package, okay, which uses the feeds provided by the studio to download the required package. That means from your local machine, these packages that are downloaded to your local machine on your hard drive, those will be sent to the remote machine. So it is, the source is your local studio. From here it is going to be sent to the remote machine, okay. So this is the meaning. So if you go for remote connection, it is sending directly from your local machine to here, the packages are sent here. Now what is the difference? The difference I am going to show you. The difference is, if you go for unattended robot connection, Studio sends only the list of project dependencies. So here it was sending the activity feeds also, right? The sources also it was sending. Here it doesn't have to send that. Why it doesn't have to send? Because it is an unattended setup. That means your remote machine through the unattended setup is also connected to orchestrator. So it doesn't have to send it. So what it does, then how it downloads those packages? So it says it uses two different sources. One is orchestrator source, and you might have already downloaded onto your local machine, right? You might have already downloaded if you have installed Studio and all that, right? So first it checks the orchestrator feeds and also checks the activity feeds locally available in that remote machine. So directly it will utilize that. If it is not locally available, it will use the orchestrator. Feed means, remember, the source, the actual source. So to conclude, what is the main difference? It sends the list of the names, it sends what are the dependencies, and also the actual package source from the local studio to the remote machine. Here it doesn't, it only sends the list. Just give me the name. You don't have to send me the source. I will download it from orchestrator feeds or the locally available feeds. Okay, that is the difference. In my previous video, you have seen the demo of remote debugging. But after watching the demo, is it enough for you to get ready for the exam? I don't think so. I have to cover so many important points in this video. So in this video, I will just focus on the very important points. Now let's start. The very first important point for remote debugging. How you access remote debugging? You go to debug tab and come to remote debugging. And here there's an option called configure remote debugging. Now the questions can have, you might get questions. What are the different types of connection types available? What are the different connection types available for remote debugging? Now here your answers are remote machine and unattended setup. Remember, very important point, connection type. The question may come around connection type. So what are the two connections type we have? One is remote machine and the second connection name is unattended. Okay, exact word if you want, unattended robot. Clear? So these are the two connection types, remote machine and the second one is unattended robot. Okay, be very clear about the connection type. So this is first point. Second point, what is the other set of questions may occur? Now let's go back to UiPath Academy remote debugging chapter. In this, scroll down and come here, setup remote debugging. Now here in this page, setup remote debugging, scroll down and come to this particular table. This table contains lot of important points which you must understand and should be able to remember for the exam. Now let's see. To run or debug a project remotely using remote machine. So we understood there are two different types of connections which we saw. What are the two different types? One is remote machine type and unattended robot. Now we are talking about remote machine type. If you are going for the connection type remote machine, for both of this I have given demo. In case you have not watched those demo, please do watch them. Now I'm talking about remote machine in this video. All the important points for the remote machine. Okay, now remote machine. To run or debug a project remotely using a remote machine connection, you should, and these are the important points, and I'm going to cover all of them. Make sure that what are the conditions required. So let me open my notepad. So second thing, we have to be careful about the condition. So what are the condition? First is, what are the condition? TCP IP connectivity exists between the studio machine and a remote machine. So what is that? TCP IP connectivity exists between the studio machine and remote. So what is the meaning? Let's say both the remote are in the same network so that they can be connected, right? You should be able to take a remote of that. You should be able to see, it is there in the same network and there is a connectivity place. So I can take a remote of that machine anytime I want. Okay, that is the meaning. So TCP IP connectivity exists between studio machine, your developer laptop machine, and the remote machine. This is the very first point. 2.2, these are the two conditions. The remote robot is the same version as studio. Let's say your studio version, for example, if I come here, the studio version is 2023.10.3. Now this studio version should be exactly, if you go to your remote machine and check the version of the assistant and click on help, these two versions should be the local machine studio version and the remote machine. Remember, remote machine UiPath assistant version should match. Okay, the robot version should match. So what is the second important point that we have learned? The remote robot is the same version as studio. Very important point to remember. If any question is framed around this, you should know which to pick. Okay, the robot version and the TCP. So both of the remote machine and studio machine should be in the same network. Or if it is a different network also, there should be a TCP IP connectivity can coexist. Okay, so these are the two conditions that you have learned. Now third point, how you set up, how do you configure? The questions can come, what are the steps included to configure a remote machine? So for a remote machine, okay, remember this point, a remote machine, this is important point. The connection type is what? Remote machine. Okay, so the question is, how would you configure a remote machine? What are the steps? Okay, let me write the steps for you one by one. 3.1. The very first step is, before the remote robot can be used for debugging, the UiPath Remote Debugging agent utility on the machine must be configured. I have shown that in the demo. Okay, now the very first step is you go to this particular path in command prompt, or this particular, there are two paths. Okay, either if you have done a per machine installation, this demo have given. In case you are not understanding what is per user, you should watch my previous videos where I've shown these things. So then what happens, your program files will be kept. If you are done a per machine installation, then your files will be there under program files. If you have done a per user installation, then your files will be there in local app data programs. This is the path. So what you have to do, you have to go to, so in the command, you have to open command prompt and type cd and any of this path, for example this. So you are entering into this path in the command prompt. We copy this again, copy and paste. So this is your very first step. So this program files you have at the studio, it could be this if your installation is per machine. If not, you should copy paste this one if it is per user installation. So what is the aim of going inside that? That I'll cover in the 3.2. So all this demo I have given, if you have seen the demo, then this makes sense. 3.2. After you have done there, then you have to run a command. What is this command? Look at this command. I'm going to copy it from here. and I'm talking all about in Windows. Okay, so this is the command you have to run: UiPath Remote Debugging Agent.exe. This exe file is available in this path. That's why we are going into this particular path and trying to run the command. What is the command? UiPath Remote Debugging Agent.exe enable. We are trying to enable it. Port number. So here the port number that we have to pass is 8573, and you can set your password of your choice. I'll set 123 123, let's say, and verbose. So this is the command I have to run in CMD. This I have to run in CMD command prompt. Okay, so once you run, what would happen? Once you run, this output will come. This also I have shown you, practically I have shown in the previous video. So now what are the next step? 3.3 is following message get displayed. What is that? Agent online and waiting for commands. That means your connection is established. Okay, so this step is done in the remote machine. Steps are done in the remote machine configuration part. So this is one part. Now steps are done in the remote machine, and these are the steps. Pretty clear? Very important point. If questions are framed, what are the right order of the steps? Then you should know. First, you should go to command prompt in the remote machine. Go to a particular path, either program files or local app data. And then you have to run a command to open the port and enable it. And enable what? UiPath Remote Debugging. And then you are setting a password. And the following message displayed: agent online and waiting command. So once this is done, now the next steps will be done in Studio. Steps done in Studio. Okay, so what are the steps done in the Studio? Let me show you. What are the steps that are done in Studio? Set up a connection to the remote robot. So how do you set up a connection? You go to Studio, and here you go to debug. You click on remote debugging. Click on configure remote debugging, and here you will select what? Remote machine. You will enter the IP address of the remote machine. You enter the port as 8573, and the password that you have set in the command, whatever it is, you need to enter that here. 123 123, and then you will test connection and save it. Test connection and save it. This demo I have given. Now once you do that, what would happen? Your connection setup is done from your Studio to the remote robot. And the next thing, make sure remote execution is enabled. So remote execution is enabled. Run or debug the project. Remote execution enabled means what? This one. If I cancel this, this should be enabled. So this should be in gray in color. If it is not in gray color, that means remote debugging is not enabled. So it should be gray in color. So this is enabled. Okay, and the third step is run or debug the project. This is pretty simple in the Studio part. So I'll copy the steps, and steps to be done I'm mentioning here. Okay, step number 1, you set up the connection I showed you. 2, make sure remote execution is enabled, and then after that you run and debug. Pretty simple steps. Now the very important part, what I am expecting is very important out of all this is this: meet the conditions for the remote robot. Okay, these conditions are important. So remember, this is a very important question. Meet the conditions. So what are the conditions? Really, what are those conditions? So initially we have seen some 2 conditions called TCP/IP connectivity exists between Studio machine and remote machine. The remote robot is the same version as Studio. This is simple, but there are actually few conditions. Let me show you what are they. Here, look at this. If interactive authentication is enforced in orchestrator. Now, what is the meaning of interactive authentication? First, I should show you. Let me go to orchestrator. I'll go to tenants. I'll go right, click on settings. I'll click on robot security. Now, if you see, earlier in the older version, it was slightly different. Now it is slightly different. The current edition of cloud, it has become hybrid. But if you see, for the attended robot, there's an option called interactive sign-on SSO. Requires user to sign in into the assistant and Studio to orchestrator and run attended processes. That means using your email address. So like, I have signed in using email address. If you look at my assistant also, I have signed in. Okay. So one way, earlier you have to create a machine key. You have to create a machine and machine key and then enter and establish the connection. But later on, what they have done, they have made it easy to sign in just using your email address, but to make it simple and easy. Let me show you one of the documentation. Okay. Look at the documentation. Setting up interactive sign-in. Very important point. Why I am showing it? Because this will enhance your understanding. The interactive sign-in feature provides an option to connect Orchestrator, Studio, and UiPath. These are the three important components: Orchestrator, Studio, and UiPath Assistant. Using user account. What is the meaning of interactive sign-in? Using the user account. That means your email address and all that. You can. I will write it on top of this. Okay, using the user account, simplifying the process of offering better sync across platforms. Now, why this is required, let me show you. Benefit of interactive sign-in: instant access to queue asset. Okay, I'll show you the important point. Okay, so look at this, which is being inherited by Orchestrator, removing the need of using license key. Interactive sign-in is a per tenant feature, meaning that it is automatically apply the settings for the new tenant. Okay, here, this is the important point. You no longer need to create individual machines or machine templates for each of the robot. These are created automatically when you go for a single sign-on. Okay, important point. It's in the notepad. So all these points, I will pass it in the description. You can just pick it from there. Okay, so the next point is this. You need to create individual machine or machine template. So without creating machine and machine template, you can sign in. That is the benefit of interactive authentication. Okay, interactive sign-in or interactive authentication. Clear? Now, let me come back to our original point. If interactive authentication is enforced in Orchestrator and you wanted to run or debug an unattended process. So for attended process, it is understandable, right? So you have the interactive sign-in, right? Now for unattended process, what happens? They are saying, you wanted to run or debug an unattended process, make sure that the remote robot meets one of the following conditions. So they are saying, so the question might come, if you wanted to run an unattended process, what are the conditions which one of the conditions should be met? Okay, so question is unattended process. If you want to run or debug an unattended process, what are the condition or which one of the conditions should be met? So here they are saying, make sure that the remote robot meets one of the following conditions. So out of 1, 2, 3, any one it should meet. So now you can imagine how the questions can be framed. Remote robot meets one of the following conditions, and what are the conditions? Either one, okay, any one. First is connected to Orchestrator using interactive sign-in. So they are saying your remote robot is connected to Orchestrator using interactive sign-in. So now this interactive sign-in, you can see, right? I mean, in the Orchestrator for the unattended robot, I didn't find it, but here for the attended robot, I find it. Maybe the older version had that. So this exam will be on the older version of 2022, not older, I mean 22.10. In the 22.10 version of Orchestrator, but we are in the cloud. So any changes are being done are reflecting over here, right? So here you can see there's a note. Interactive sign-in authentication requires recompiling the workflows that they use Orchestrator activities. Okay, Orchestrator API have 2020.10 activity package or higher. Now for the exam point of view, I'm just letting you know which one to focus. So this is the point. Remote robot is connected to Orchestrator using interactive sign-in. This could be one option. Okay, that's all. Using interactive sign-in, it should be connected. This is one option. The second option is connected using machine key and user is also signed in. So that means you have connected your UiPath assistant using the machine key, the older setup, and a user is also signed in. So if you look at my setup, okay, so I have connected using service URL, but again you can connect using the, if I sign out, I can connect using the machine key, and also I've signed in. You can see this logo is there, signed in. You can see RK is showing. So it is saying connected using machine key and a user is also signed in from the assistant. This is the second important point for the exam. So this here the question will be framed. If you want to run or debug an unattended process, what should be the, how the remote robot should be connected? Choose one of the, or choose the right options. So it could be either one of them, or right, either one of them. So remote robot is connected to orchestra using interactive sign-in. So only thing you remember is interactive sign-in. Second, connected using machine key and user is also signed in from assistant. And the third point is connected using machine key. So here the same, the previous condition, connected using machine key. So I'm writing MK. Let me write connected using machine key but not signed in. So in this condition, what here he was signed in the assistant, but here it is he is not signed in. If he's not signed in, then there's another additional thing comes is troubleshooting session is enabled in orchestrator for the machine. Okay, troubleshooting session should be enabled. Now the question comes is, how do you enable this troubleshooting session? Now what I've done, I was looking for documentation. I'll pass this particular link, not this one. Yeah, I'll pass this link for the interactive sign-in, and also I'll pass this link in the description of the video. Enabling troubleshooting session for unattended process. So here, as per the steps in the documentation, tenant monitoring unattended session. So this I could not find it when I tried it. So I go here to tenant monitoring and then unattended sessions. So here they were saying just select one of the machine and then enable it. Okay, unattended session from the section drop down menu. Identify the machine where the error occurred. Click more actions at the end of the machine row and select configure troubleshooting session, which I was not able to find it out. If you could, let me know in the comment section. Configure. So this is what is configure troubleshooting session. So what the point is talking about, in case he is not signed in, you need to enable the troubleshooting session. So this is as per the 2022.10, and your orchestrator that you're using is latest one, 2023 cloud version you are using. So that's why you may or may not be able to find these options, but doesn't matter, you understood the important points. Okay, so this is very important point. And after that, we go back to the documentation. Okay, after that your robot gets connected. So I've shown all of this. Make sure that configure remote agent by enabling the remote debugging agent by going to this path and entering that command. And after that, in the studio I've shown you how do you configure, right? This steps I've shown you, and the last step is meet the conditions. And here are the important points, where the very first important point is either any of this should be true, remote robot is connected to orchestrator using interactive sign-in, okay, or else using machine key and signed in the assistant, or else using machine key but not signed in, but a troubleshooting session is enabled. So these are the three important points. I'll pass all of this in the description of the video, which you can, which might help you to revise. We are going to talk about our second connection type, which is unattended robot. Just to remind you, in remote debugging, here if you go to configure remote debugging, you have the option remote machine and the other one is unattended robot. So in this one, we are going to talk about the unattended robot connection type, and make note of very important points that is important for our exam preparation. So let's get started. Now here in this table, this is available in setup remote debugging, and if you scroll down, you find this section. In this one, let's read each of this point carefully and make note of the keywords. The very first point, all prerequisites are met. So here in the previous one, we have seen any one of them, but here all the conditions should be met. Okay, all conditions should be met. So what is the first condition? Let's see that. The very first condition is studio and the target robot are connected to same orchestrator tenant. So this is the keyword. Connected to same orchestrator tenant. What are those things should be connected? Your studio and remote and the unattended robot. Okay. So both of them should be connected to the same orchestrated tenant. Now there will be questions connected to any tenant, connected to same tenant. So you should remember this word is important. Same orchestrator tenant. Clear? Now let's move on to our second point. Studio, the target robot and orchestrator are running version 2021.10 or later. Now look at this. For the robot, they are saying the minimum version should be this. Okay, this is the key point. For the robot means your unattended robot should be having the version 2021 10.6. This is the minimum. Anything higher works for it. And what is the version for the studio? Studio version starting with 2021 10.16. It's same. Both robot and studio should have the same version. Robot and studio. This is second important point. First one, connected to the same orchestrated tenant. Second one, the studio version should be minimum 2021 10.6 or higher. Clear? Okay. Third point. What is the third point? The user signed into studio has permission to start job. Now it is talking about user who will be running the debugging, right? What are the permissions required? The very first permission they are talking about, you should have permission to start job. What is the permission? You should have permission to start job. And then other permission to create and delete storage buckets and storage files. So create, delete, simply make few words. Create, delete, storage buckets and files. Simple. These are the minimum permissions required. First permission is 3.1. The user should have permission to start jobs. And the second permission is create, delete, storage buckets and files. Clear? Okay, let's focus on our fourth point. The unattended robot is configured and the machine has one of the following runtime licenses. This is a very important point. Okay, what kind of license your unattended robot should have for a remote debugging? If this question asked, you are given multiple options of different license types. You should only select unattended or non-production. What is that license? What should be the license type? The license type should be either unattended or non-production. No testing license and all that. Okay, unattended or non-production. Clear? Now let's look at our fifth point. Fifth point, for debugging foreground processes, this could be also a question. For debugging foreground processes, what should be enabled? The option run foreground automation is enabled for the robot in orchestrators. So this is an important point. For foreground processes, what should be enabled? You have to enable the option run foreground option is enabled. Okay, so this is the point. So these are the important point. Now let's recap. What are the things we have learned? When you are going for unattended robot, the very first condition that you need is connected to the same orchestrated tenant, both studio and the unattended robot. Second point, for the robot and studio, they should be running on the minimum version 2021.10.6 or higher. User permission, the studio user should have permission to start jobs, create, delete storage buckets and files. When it comes to licenses, you should have unattended licenses or non-production license. The robot should contain unattended or non-production license. Fifth point, foreground processes to run any foreground process, what you have to do, the option run foreground automation is enabled. Now let me show you this. Run foreground automation means this one. Okay, run foreground automation for your robot, for your unattended robot, this should be checked. Run foreground automation, okay, should be enabled. So these are the point. I'm going to pass all these points in the description of the video. Please copy it. That this might help you. It is easy to read these points and remember, right, after you have gone through the documentation available on the academy. All right, now look at in Studio. In Studio, what you have to do in Studio is pretty simple. You go here, you selected the unattended robot and start selecting the users, the machine and host name, and show live stream and click on save. That is all you have to do in Studio. Once you have done made the connection, then you can debug. So the remote debugging will start. This video, I've shown a demonstration of this in my previous video. Hope you have seen that. So this is important. Now I'm also going to cover one more important point. Okay, one more important point. Perform remote execution. So to perform remote execution, this button should be clicked. So when you click on this button, see it is becoming white. If you click once again, it should be gray in color. That means remote debugging is enabled. Important point. As long as button is highlighted in gray, all run and debug operations, debug file and all that, on the remote robot it happens. Okay, as long as the button is not highlighted in gray, all run and debug operations are performed in the local robot. Pretty simple. Okay, now this is an important point. These two are very important point. Let me cover this. Depending on the type of connection used for remote debugging, what are the two different type of connection? One is remote machine, the other one is unattended robot connection. The remote robot gets the activity packages required to execute project as follows. This point I have already covered in my previous video, but again let me highlight. When you are going for the remote machine connection, that means when I am going for the first option, remote machine, if I go for the remote machine connection, that time what happens, your local studio is going to send the list of project dependencies and activity feeds. That means the entire packages from your local machine, it is going to be sent to the remote robot. So feeds means, remember, feeds means the package source. I mean, every package will have some MB, right? Some size will be there. So that entire, it will send the list of project dependencies and also the activity feed. The package source will be sent to the remote robot. To a temporary folder it will be sent, it will be cleared later on, which uses the feeds provided by Studio to download the required packages. Okay, when you go for the second option, unattended robot, that time what happens? Does the local studio sends the feeds or the package feeds is sent to the remote robot? No, this is the difference. Okay, in the first one it sends the list of project dependencies, the names of them and their source also it sends. It sends that folder. In unattended robot, Studio sends only the list of project dependencies, meaning what? It only sends the name. Okay, I am using mail activities, I am using Excel activities, only this two activity package. Okay, only send the name. After it sends the name, what happens? How that remote, the unattended robot gets that activity package? There are two sources for it. One is the orchestrator feed. It gets from the orchestrator because it is connected, right? It is an unattended robot which is connected. So it directly gets those packages directly from the orchestrator. Or else the activity feeds configured on the remote robot. So the remote robot also you have installed Studio in that. If you have installed Studio, it will also check the local one. If it is available, start using it there. So any of these two options it will use, but it doesn't send the local feeds from the developer's laptop to the remote machine. So this is also a very important point. Okay, now let me cover this known limitations. When you use a remote machine connection, if you pause debugging for an extended period of time, a connection closed error might occur in Studio. Okay, so if you are pausing the debugging process, then the connection will get closed. Even though on the remote machine, the connection still appears to be active. To avoid this issue, you can increase the TCP idle timeout in your cloud or on-premise load balancer. Okay, now this is something you may or may not be able to do it if you don't have access. But again, remember, connection closed error might occur during the remote debugging if you keep it in pause state. Remote debugging, long running workflows is only supported for unattended robot connections. Remote debugging, long running workflows is only supported for unattended robot. If you have a huge workflow, you should only go with the unattended robot connection. You should not go with the first option. You should not use the first option, remote machine. Rather, you should go with the unattended if it is a long workflow. When you use an unattended robot connection, the second option, selecting the picture in picture option does not start execution in a separate. So picture in picture is something, if you are going for the second option, it will not work. The show live stream option works only if the robot service on the unattended robot is deployed in service mode. Now you're installing the unattended robot has to be done in the service mode. Let's say you have not done it in the service mode, the show live stream option won't work. So it's saying the show live stream option works only if the robot service on the unattended robot is deployed in service mode. Okay. Last point. The show live stream option is only supported for automation cloud orchestrator and automation suite orchestrator, not for on-premise ones. This is also another option. The show live stream, I've shown you the during the demo of unattended robot connection type. I've shown this demo. Okay, these are a couple of important points. Just go through them, and that would help in case any kind of questions are framed around this. You know what should be the right answer. So thank you guys for watching. Let's move on to some of the questions right now. As we have covered the entire topic around remote debugging, let's see what should be the right answer for this question available in the practice test. Let me read this question for you. When performing remote debugging using a remote machine connection, Studio, so which connection they are talking about? Remote machine connection. There are two types of connection. Remote machine and unattended robot. So it is talking about the first connection. Studio sends the list of project dependencies to the remote robot. From where does the remote robot download the required packages? From where it downloads the required packages? Options are activity feeds configured in Studio, orchestrator feeds and robot activity feeds, Studio local NuGet cache, orchestrator feeds and UiPath official activity feed. So what exactly it's saying, when you are going for, let me show you practically, when you are going for debug and click on remote debugging, configure remote debugging, and here let's say you are selecting this option, remote machine. If you're going with this option, when you debug, from where all these packages required for the project, from where it downloads, that is the question. Okay, so please take your time and comment your answer. Which one you think? First one, second one, third one, fourth one. Which is the right answer? First you comment. I hope you have commented or at least thought of which is the right answer. Let me show you the documentation. So in the remote debugging with Studio chapter, if you come to setup remote debugging, and if you scroll down and come to this particular section, remote machine connection, unattended robot connection. The remote machine connection. Here if you read this, Studio, the local Studio sends the list of project dependencies and activity feeds package source where your packages are available to the remote robot, which uses the feeds provided by Studio. So where it is using the activity feed provided by Studio to download the required packages. So out of all this four options, there are two confusing answers: Studio local NuGet cache, and it says activity feeds configured in Studio. Now out of these two, which is the right answer? Let me show you. If you go to your Studio and go to design panel click on manage packages and click on settings. So here your local folder, whatever you have is configured here, right? This is the activity feed from the local, from your studio. C uses, it could be different for your location. Okay, so here it is not talking about NuGet cache and all that. It is talking about the local feed, the activity feed. So here the correct answer will be activity feeds configured in studio. Let's see our next question. Which is a valid connection type for performing remote debugging? So it is talking about how many different connection types you have. Remote robot, or which is the valid one? Okay, remote robot, attended robot, unattended robot, orchestrator. So what is the right one? So we have learned two different connection types, right? If you go to debug and then click on remote debugging, click on configure remote debugging. So what are the different connection types we have here? Remote machine and unattended robot. This is the name. So here, which is the right answer? This should be the right answer. Let's answer one of the question from the academy. What are the types of connection to connect to remote robot? What are the two different types of connection? One we have known as, you have seen that in UiPath Studio, there are two types of connection. One is remote machine and unattended robot. So the unattended robot is also known as TCP/IP. So here you can see establish a TCP/IP connection. So in the unattended robot, we enter the IP address, host name and all that, right? So this is the one of the right answer. Second, connect to an unattended robot in the same tenant. Yes, the second connection type is unattended robot in the same tenant. So this is also the right answer. Connect to an unattended robot. So attended robot is a wrong. Fourth option, connect to an unattended robot in the different tenant. No, we don't use different tenant. It's both the studio and the robot should be in the same tenant. So these are the two right answer. Now let's click on submit and see which is the right answer. So you can see both the answers are correct. Now the next important thing is you have to go through the knowledge check available in the academy topic. Okay, on this topic, remote debugging, scroll down and go to check your knowledge. Okay, come here. Now here there are a couple of questions we must go through. Let's see the very first question. Match each description with the correct sequence of steps to run or debug a project remotely using unattended robot connected to orchestrator. And here are your options. Now the first thing, what will you do? Set up a connection to the remote robot. Run or debug. Run or debug would be the last one, right? Okay. Make sure all the prerequisites are met. This should be your first step. Make sure remote execution is enabled. Set up connection to the remote robot. So make sure all, after that you should set up and then make sure remote execution is enabled and run or debug a project. So this should be your right sequence. If you hit on submit, you can see all the answers are correct. Let's move on to next question. What are some of the main prerequisites to establish an unattended robot connection? What are the prerequisites? Now this could be slightly complicated. For this, what you do, go to UiPath, the same course, and here in this course, go to debug using unattended robot. Click on this. Now here if you scroll down, here you have something called make sure all the prerequisites are met for this type of connection, and here are your prerequisites. Now in this, let's go through so that we will answer that question. Studio and the target robot are connected to the same orchestrator tenant. Remember, same orchestrator tenant, both. Studio, this is the version. Studio and your remote robot should be running at least the minimum version is 2021 10.6. This is another important point. Third, the user signed in to Studio has permission to start jobs and create and delete storage bucket. This is also another important point. Permission. Next, the unattended robot is configured and the machine has one of the following runtime license. Remember, these are the three license types are allowed: unattended, non-production, and testing. Testing runtime for remote debugging are supported in Orchestrator 2022.4 and later. So remember, three licenses are allowed, three different types. For debugging a foreground process, the option run foreground automation is enabled for the robot. Okay, this is a very important point. If a troubleshooting session is used, it must be enabled only after connecting robot to orchestrator. This troubleshooting session should be enabled only after you connect the robot to orchestrator. So these are the important points you have read. Now let's answer this question. Studio and the target robot are connected to the same, which is correct. Same, correct. Second, the unattended robot is configured and the machine has one of the following runtime licenses available: unattended or non-production. This is incorrect because there are three types, right? Testing is also allowed. Look at this. The unattended robot is configured and the machine has one of the following runtime licenses: unattended, non-production, testing. So this is correct. Studio and the target robot are connected to any of the orchestrator, which is wrong. For debugging foreground processes, the option run foreground automation is enabled for the robot, which is correct. So these are the three right options. Hit on submit. Let's see. So you can see 1, 2, 3, which is correct. Let's go through the next question. Remote debugging enables you to, there's a dash. Now, which is the right answer? Remote debugging. Run and debug attended processes on robot deployed to remote machine except Linux. So are you only doing attended process? No, both attended and unattended are allowed. So this is a wrong. Second, run and debug attended processes on robots. So only attended means it's wrong. Okay. Run and debug unattended processes on robots deployed to only unattended. This is also wrong. Now let's see the last option. Run and debug attended and unattended. So this is right. On robots deployed on remote machines, including Linux robots that can be run cross-platform projects. So this is the right answer. Getting it? Submit. So you know why this option is correct. All right. Fourth question. Review question. Where does the changing a variable in the immediate panel reflect? So this is, I think, pretty simple. So it will reflect in watch panel. It will reflect in local panel. The execution of the workflow at runtime, further execution and debug mode of the workflow, right? So these are the right answers. Okay, let's move on. Fifth, match each description with the correct sequence of steps to set up a remote machine connection. So here it is talking about the first connection type, remote machine. Okay, now what you will do, select the debug tab. Okay, I will select the debug tab. Open the remote debugging settings window. Correct, this is also correct. And then select the remote machine, the connection type you will select, and then test connection and save. No, provide all the necessary information in remote debugging setting tab. After you provide, then you test connection and save. It is talking about this particular window, right? You come to debug, it come to this one, select remote machine, enter everything and test connection. This is the question it is talking about. So now let's submit. And you can see all the options that we have organized is correct. Let's hit on next. If interactive authentication is enforced in orchestrator and you wanted to run or debug an unattended process, then what conditions should the remote robot meet? Okay, now remember, for this you come to this course and go to setup remote debugging, and here you come here, meet the condition for the remote robot. Here what it said, make sure that remote robot meets one of the following conditions. One of the following conditions out of these three, any one it should meet. Connected to orchestrator using interactive sign-in, connected using machine key and a user is also signed in from the assistant, connected using machine key or no user is signed in from the assistant, and the troubleshooting session is enabled. So these are the three different options. Okay, now here if you see any one of the following, and here it says all of the following, and there are a couple of wrong options given. So here the answer should be any one of the following. Okay, this should be your right answer. Hit on submit and next, and you can see you have scored 100 out of 100.